War was waged in heaven between Lucifer and Michael, along with all their respective angels, and in the end, Lucifer was defeated and cast down to hell.
Welcome back to the channel, or welcome to the channel. My name is Utikas if you are new, and so without wasting any time, let's get to the video.
The story of Lucifer's rebellion is told in the New Testament of the Christian Bible. In the book of Revelation, we learn of a war in heaven that was waged between the angels and the devil's army. The angels were led by the mighty archangel Michael, while Lucifer led the rebellion against God. The tale of Lucifer's fall comes in many different forms depending on where we are looking. In the Armenian, Georgian, and Latin versions of the story of Adam and Eve, Lucifer rebels after the creation of Adam. Lucifer doesn't wish to bow down to humans. It's even the same story in the Islamic version of the Bible. Iblis, the Islamic leader of the devils, refuses to bow down to Adam in the garden. Another version is that Lucifer refused to become a subject of God's son, and so he rebelled. But no matter what his motivation was, the story ends the same every single time. War was waged in heaven between Lucifer and Michael, along with all their respective angels, and in the end, Lucifer was defeated and cast down to hell. However, many biblical scholars believe the war in heaven was a sneaky reference to the spiritual warfare being fought in the early days of the church. It may have been a symbolic event that really happened, likely a reference to the war between paganism and Christianity.
There are a lot of biblical scholars who do not think that the Bible is logical, but mostly symbolical. But what do you think? We were never really there to know for sure, but if you're a believer, then I think that that's a matter of your faith, that you should do more research by yourself or with other people and trusted sources and come up with your own conclusions. So let's continue with the video.
Number 4. The Dragon. There's a piece of the book of Daniel that was removed for not being authentic enough by the Catholic Church. The forbidden piece of text is called Bel and the Dragon. It was cut from the Protestant Bible, but it did make it into the King James Bible. The story is a strange one because some say it has to do with an ancient Mesopotamian deity called Marduk and his faithful dragon. In Mesopotamia, Marduk, son of Enki, was one of the most important gods, the equivalent of Zeus in the Greek pantheon. He was the patron god of Babylon and presided over justice, fairness, and compassion. He was also seen as the god of storms and was worshipped as the agricultural deity. His temple was likely the model for the biblical Tower of Babel. He also happened to have a monstrous reptile named the Meshusu dragon, which we can see depicted on the magnificent Ishtar Gate of Babylon, built around 575 BC. In Bel and the Dragon, Bel is a statue worshipped by the Mesopotamians, meant to represent Marduk. Daniel goes about trying to convince the statue worshippers that they're doing the wrong thing by worshipping a false idol. In the end, though, the statue is destroyed, and Daniel is thrown into a pit of lions. Number 3. The Burning Garbage Dump. What if hell wasn't what you thought it was? Instead of being a fiery pit of damnation where you would go to burn for all of eternity, what if hell in the Bible was just referring to a garbage dump in ancient Jerusalem? The thing about the Bible is that it's full of secret meanings, metaphors, and vague analogies. Jesus may not have been warning people about a realm of fire and brimstone, but rather of a filthy burning garbage dump in Gehenna. In Matthew 5:29, Jesus warns that if a person sins, they'll go to hell. He says if your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. Jesus warns that it's better to lose one part of your body than for all of you to be thrown into hell. However, the word hell in this context is a direct translation from the Greek word Gehenna. In ancient Jerusalem, Gehenna also happens to be the name of the place where they burned their garbage. Legend has it there was so much trash in Jerusalem being burned that the fire raged day and night. There's a chance that when Jesus warned that a person could wind up in hell, he really meant in a flaming garbage dump where they would suffer for all of eternity. Number 2.
Yeah, I have heard of that before. I think the synonym for Gehenna would be Sheol, but I might be wrong.
The Horned Moses. Apparently, Moses had horns. There's no easier way to say it. The very man who received the 10 Commandments from God at the top of Mount Sinai in Egypt and returned the Israelites to the Promised Land had horns. All throughout the ancient world, Moses was depicted in art as having two horns sprouting from his head like the devil. One of the most famous of these depictions is Michelangelo's Moses, which today sits in the tomb of Pope Julius II in St. Peter's Basilica. For the last 2,000 years, people just kind of accepted that Moses had devil horns. But why in the world was this ever a thing? Historians say the idea of Moses having horns likely started with the Vulgate Bible. This was a Latin translation created by St. Jerome in the 4th century AD and would later become the Latin Bible up until 1979. It was arguably the most important Bible ever written. When St. Jerome was translating, he was likely a little confused on how to translate rays of light from Hebrew to Latin. Instead, he described Moses as having a horn, since it was fairly similar in shape. However, the terrible translation ended up giving Moses a pair of horns for the next few centuries. The translated Bible was mass-produced, and people just accepted that Moses had horns like a goat. Number 1. The Gospel of Mark. The Gospel of Mark has one of the strangest endings of any biblical book. The narrative ends so abruptly that scholars doubt its authenticity. Many believe the current Gospel of Mark was somehow changed, and that the original version had a longer and more complete ending. It's as if somebody cut the author off in the middle of their sentence. It's especially jarring if you read the Gospel in one sitting from beginning to end. You get into the groove of it, then all of a sudden the ending throws you way off balance. The theory is that the final verses are not the original text, and that they may have been altered from what was originally written. The Gospel of Mark ends like this: "And they fled from the tomb, for fear and trembling had seized them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid." This is a reference to an event that happens after Jesus Christ is crucified. Mary Magdalene and her companions traveled to his tomb, only to find that his body had been removed. And there before them was a young man who none of them had ever seen before. He told them Jesus of Nazareth had risen, and that Mary should tell his disciples that he'd gone up to heaven. The Gospel then ends with Mary and her disciples leaving the tomb and saying nothing. It's an extremely odd ending, and many people suspect there's much more to it. But what happened to the original script if there was more at the end of the Gospel? At the moment, it seems to be a mystery. What's your favorite outrageous story from the Bible? Let us know in the comments below. If you haven't already, remember to subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
I've seen this happen in a lot of videos where you think they're going to talk about one story and then they switch up and start talking about entirely different stories. But it's still interesting to see what this guy had to say about the Bible. And I do have a question before this video ends. What was the criteria the scholars or religious leaders used to determine what would be included and not included in the Bible? Because what this guy talked about in the last minutes of the video, the book of Mark, which is quite weird if you read it from start to finish. If anyone knows, you can tell me if anyone knows, you can tell me in the comments section. But I'll leave down the link to the original video so you can see this video in full. And yeah, I always say this, but go out there and do your own research. And before this video becomes too long, thank you for watching, and see you amazing people in the next video.
Kick.